Are you looking for a way to grow your B2B business or software company? Well, how about learning some of the best tips for content marketing, connecting with potential partners, and pitching your business? Well, if that's you and it sounds great, I invite you to join us on our upcoming B2B content marketing Q&A and speed dating podcast party. This is a live Zoom call for our community members and listeners to our podcast that can come along, and you'll get to interact, learn something new, and then also have a chance to get expert advice and make valuable connections. All right. The session will be recorded and published on our Authentic Influence podcast. All right. So register now and join us live on Zoom. The next event is coming up in a few weeks' time. Just head over to simplecreativemarketing.com/podcast party. That's simplecreativemarketing.com/podcast party to register. There's only 15 spots, so if you want to jump in, go ahead and do that today. Hope to see you there real soon.
Welcome to Authentic Influence with host Anthony Chansamuth, the show where we get real and share the stories and struggles, strategies and tactics of successful influencers and entrepreneurs so that you too can take action to create the life and business that you choose. And now over to Anthony.
What's up, warriors? So this week we're going to do something a little different, and I'm going to share with you an interview that I did recently on the B2B Power Hour podcast with host Nicholas Thickett. So I was invited onto the podcast to talk about how to use case studies to prove your brand's value. And so in the interview we talk about we answer some questions where we're going into topics like, are case studies still relevant in our digital world? Where can we use case studies? And how do you actually create a compelling case study that delivers results? Nicholas' audience is similar to ours, so we're talking about B2B businesses, SMBs, SMEs if you're in Australia. And so this is all, if you are in sales enablement, if you are in marketing, then this episode is for you. I hope you enjoyed the interview, and Nicholas has been kind enough to let us share this one on Authentic Influence. And I would recommend that you also pop over to the B2B Power Hour podcast and check out Nicholas's weekly interviews and episodes. I think he might even be increasing the volume on those, but certainly if you're into sales, B2B sales and digital marketing, that's a podcast you subscribe to. Now enjoy the interview.
Hello and welcome to the B2B Power Hour with your host, Nicholas Thickett. Unfortunately, Mr. Morgan Smith will not be joining us. He's taking a well-earned vacation, but that doesn't mean that we can't battle the way it's always been done in the sales and marketing world. And to do that, I'm bringing in a special guest, Anthony Chansamuth.
Well, hey, what's happening? What's up, Nicholas?
I cannot wait for this because it must be coincidence, or maybe it's just because I'm thinking about it because I knew that we were going to be chatting, but it keeps coming up over and over, from demand gen to buyer enablement, how case studies fit in. And so I'd love to do a quick intro. Anybody that's listening, please go and say hello. Let me know where you're coming from in the chat. After me and Anthony go through a few of our key points, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, please throw it in the chat and let's get started. So Mr. Anthony is a content strategist and copywriter and podcaster, which is very important these days. His company, Simple Creative Marketing, is known for creating case studies and epic posts to drive traffic for web business owners so they don't have to. Super critical. He typically works with $1 million services and software businesses that sell online training. He's worked with leading brands such as Bean Ninjas, Systemology, and Hub Australia. And he's been featured in Forbes, Inc., Good Men Project, and Huffington Post. And he calls Sydney, Australia home, so I think good morning is in order.
That's right. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here. Not too early. It's actually pretty good. Thanks for inviting me on, Nick. I'm definitely keen to add some value here around case studies.
Yeah, it's funny because everybody keeps asking me what's the point, and I think a good place to start is why did you get into case studies?
So I'll take you back to when I actually had my last full-time role at a company. I actually worked for a co-working company here in Sydney. We managed 3 locations across Australia, 800 members at a time, and that's probably like tripled since I left. But one of the key strategic moves that we made during my time there was to work out, okay, what type of content. We knew we had to invest in content. We also knew we had to attract leads and enable sales through our content marketing. And so, it was on my head to work out, well, what's the best type of content to put out there? And I could imagine some of the people watching this and listening thinking, yeah, what is the best type of content to put out there to drive acquisition? And so for our business, it was, well, we had this light bulb moment where it's like, why are we all here, right? We asked the team members and we all said, well, we came because we knew someone that was already a member in the space, or they were involved in the community in some way. And they basically brought us in for an event. And then once we came in for an event, a social event, then we kind of got hooked. It was like, okay, we like this place. We want to stick around. And so then it was a no-brainer. The whole strategy was, hey, let's go and interview our members, right? Get them to tell their stories, why they're here, what benefits have they gained from being a part of this organization, and what would they recommend to others, right? And so that became a monthly activity for all 3 spaces. We would then, that would be on the KPI. You have to interview at least one member, give that to Anne for them produce a story on that. I also started producing a podcast at that time and interviewing co-working members for the podcast and sharing their stories, the founder story. And that became sort of the first real foray into the world of case studies and using it in a B2B context.
That's interesting. And it's funny because you think of attribution software, everybody keeps pointing that, it's SEO and some people get into some of the content strategy, but I guess it really comes down to how they get there. Right. And
yeah.
So I think that might lead into a good question of, so I don't know if we should start with like where to use them, or I know one of the questions is, are they still relevant in the digital world? And I think that's a good place to start actually, because I get asked that, as a salesperson, should I be using case studies? I say yes. And I think marketers should use it even more, but I'd love to hear your take on that. Are they still relevant?
Absolutely, 100% still relevant. And the biggest challenge that we're seeing, so I spend a lot of time in B2B marketing, and you're more so in sales, I would think. But I see the intersection between the two, and we had a wonderful conversation previously about that. And from a marketing point of view and being online, content, the saying is content is king, and everyone is producing content like crazy, right? Like there's literally millions of blog posts going up every day. And so you're in a very competitive space. To stand out is much more difficult now than it was 10 years ago with a piece of content. And to get ranking is even just a whole nother level. Like it's not just good enough anymore to produce a 500 or 700 word article and put it on your website. Now we're talking thousands, right? 2,000, 10,000. There are 20,000 word guides sitting on B2B websites, with tremendous research behind it, right? They've done surveys, they've gone out and, they've paid a marketing research company to go out and really survey, 500 businesses or SMEs to really get an insight into one specific asset. It could be conversion, could be demand generation, could be lead generation, whatever it may be. Not all companies and small businesses can do that or have the ability to do that, right? But what we can do is we can actually do case studies. We can actually interview our clients, the ones that we've worked with where we've produced a result and an outcome for, and say, hey, tell your story. Why did you come to us? How did we help you? What were the steps that we took to support you to get the result and the outcome? And let's share that story. Let's give you a bit of love and profile the type of business that you are and get you some traffic as well. So this becomes a real collaboration with your clients, right? With your partners. Right? I've seen this work in the partnership world really well as well. And that type of content, it does something that a lot of how-to guides and things like that don't do, which it actually gives proof that the thing you're selling actually works, right? It's one thing to teach a topic, and you can say, yeah, I can teach you all about the 7 steps to generate leads from LinkedIn, right? Now, when it becomes really powerful is through that content where you actually say, well, here are 5 examples of clients I've worked with or people of businesses I've worked with where we actually did this strategy and we got results from, right?
It's nice when those are different strategies because then they're the best cases or those best use cases so people could start putting them in their shoes.
100%, right? And so that's where that type of content. So if you're paying attention to what we're doing here, we're actually still producing your long form content, your how-to guides. What we're doing is embedding storytelling and social proof and evidence-backed storytelling to then make that really compelling, right?
And that's always been one of my problems with case studies is somebody throws out a survey, they take some whole whack of information, they do a meta-analysis, and then they're like, here, this is what this is what came of it. And I really wonder sometimes, like, did you start out with an end in mind and you just tweak the numbers to get what you wanted? And so I think of case studies more as like fact checking, that it's kind of
100%.
proofs in the pudding, right? And because that's always my fear as a salesperson, it's about trust. As soon as you burn the bridges of trust, you're done. And if you kill your reputation in the process, there's no you can't hit the restart button. And so that was always my worry with case studies and also like big numbers and metrics.
Yeah.
Because people can smell bullshit. And the problem is if you get called out on it and you can't back it up, where do you go?
We've seen that. Like there are influencers or whatever you want to call these people, a dime a dozen on YouTube, on Instagram. They're talking about 8-figure success and whatever it may be. They're throwing out these numbers, and then what I like to do is jump onto their website and show me the results. Like actually, don't just paint the picture of the promise, but also can you deliver on the actual results. I don't know if you've been through this, Nicholas, but I've been through programs. I've invested $10,000 on a program to work with a guru, and the customer support was just from that. Once we signed the money over, right, the customer support disappeared. There was none. Like there was no hey, I've got the questions about this, how do I best utilize this training or whatever it may be, and there's crickets.
Silence.
Right? And then I'm talking to other people who have left and had complaints. I should have done this beforehand, but what they do really well is they hide all that information. So if anyone puts a negative review up, they go and send their lawyers onto them, and so there's that whole other thing going on. So to your point, numbers are useful to some degree, but are they actually what numbers are you looking at? And for me now, I'm always challenging new numbers. So I'm looking at, well, what's the actual profit? And tell me the story behind the scenes. And that's where I think with case studies, we can get into a bit of that behind the scenes, because not only are we, sharing the client story, but we're also sharing our own. And I know we're going to get into the framework in a moment, but we're also, sharing our expertise and showcasing, well, these are the steps that we took to actually produce the outcome. Right. And that it removes it can be very
dagger from everything.
Yeah.
That's always my fear is you go onto these websites, you see these big claims and you're like, cool, how? Like I've been in sales a long time and I've worked with people that have been truly gifted with conversation and whether written or like spoken word. And there is no way in hell they can make that happen. So unless you're using some AI that I've never heard of, or there's something fishy, something doesn't make sense. And I think that's what I love about case studies, or why I'm even looking at them for KO and everything going forward, because it takes away the mystery. And who doesn't love storytelling? But I think even too, the companies that need it the most are the ones that don't believe in it, because they usually have the ROI that's hard to prove.
Mm.
Right? Like how many companies do you know that you ask them like, what can I get from this? And they can't give you a straight answer, because what they do is kind of whether it's the soft skills, it's a complex service that isn't directly tied to revenue, but that's usually what people look at, is just, is it making me money or is it losing me money?
Yeah, you're on point right there with those, Nicholas. And for me, the power of case studies, it really comes down to three things. One, it provides context. Right. So if you have a buyer going through a buyer decision, or even just in a research phase, they're looking for similar context to what they're going through. Right. So, are we a similar sized business? Do we have similar challenges? Right. If we're a marketing department that's struggling, or we are a sales department, or we're procurement and we're trying to work out the best solution, whatever it may be. I want to see examples of other companies that are similar to ours, right? Might not be identical, but certainly in the same industry, same functionality, whatever it may be. Context, right? And what were the challenges? What was their research like when they when they were trying to find a solution? What were the options they were evaluating? These sort of things, right? Because that helps the buyer. Like if I want to buy a car or a house, I'm going to go through that process. I'm going to look at multiple, dealerships. I'm going to look at whatever it may be. I'm going to talk to my buddies. I'm going to say, okay, what would you recommend? All these things, right? Second thing is empathy, right? So when I can see, and we know this through storytelling is why we love Hollywood feature films and all these, Disney films and things like this. When we can see ourselves inside the character, right, or the experience of the character, and we can empathize with, okay, you've given me the context, but now I can also associate to the pain, because I can see, yes, they were struggling with these 2 or 3 things, and look, that's what we're going through right now. You can see yourself in, the buyer can see themselves in the shoes of that particular case study. And then the third thing is the methodology, which we just talked about. Okay, can you show me the process, right? And what we know is, certainly from all the case studies that we've produced for our clients, is whenever they can detail to some degree, and it doesn't have to be give away the secret sauce completely, but certainly to some degree show the prospective buyer the steps that they would need to take on their own to produce the outcome. In 99% of the time, they just say it's just too hard. We can't do it. We don't have the capability. Don't have the expertise in house. These things come up, and then they go, "I'm just going to hire you because that's just you're the expert. Obviously, you've been able to produce the result multiple times, right? I just want to work with you. Let's go. Let's have that conversation." So, context, empathy, and methodology. Those 3 things really, are the crux of a strong story.
I feel like we should almost play devil's advocate here, because we've kind of like built it up so much. I think it's good for people to hear too, where like, when should you not use case studies, and where do they go wrong? Maybe that's another one. I would say that it goes back to one of my biggest fears with case studies, and the reason why I fact check them is it honest? Is it real? Because if you can't fulfill that promise, do not show people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it scares a lot of organizations to go down that path of producing them, because I've had this. I've worked with a firm where they love the whole concept, love the idea. Yes, we want to do case studies. And when I said to them, can you select 3 clients where we can interview and actually tell this story, and what results have you been able to produce for them? They straight away the reaction was, oh crap, we actually haven't produced a significant result with the client just yet, and I said, well, look, probably best to come back, in 6 months or 12 months when you've actually had been able to validate, what you can do, and they're going to be happy to share the story as well, right? The best time to actually do a case study is actually when you've had completed a project, or you've actually had success somewhere, and the client is happy to be involved in that process because you've helped them solve a problem, right? To your question, Nick, like around, okay, when does it not make sense? Well, that's one situation where it wouldn't make sense, when you're actually not ready. All right, the business is not ready. Maybe you're a startup and you don't have those wins on the board yet.
Don't know your personas, or
right,
yeah,
those things. Another time, is when maybe you're now we're talking B2B here, so I'm assuming the audience is B2B. But if you were in the product world and you're launching products and whatnot, most cases, reviews work better than products for products, because they can go onto your various review platforms. If you're on Amazon, right, you don't really have space to put a case study. Like, it has to be a review, and then it becomes a volume play where it's like we need literally hundreds of reviews before it makes sense for people to want to buy from us, right? So that's another place where I wouldn't recommend a case study. Also, just if we're looking at the funnel, let's break down, top of the funnel, medium, middle, and bottom. Now, I'm a bit skewed in my thinking here because I've seen it work in all across the whole funnel. But typically, case studies work better the lower you go down the funnel. So if you're at the bottom of the funnel and you're in that, conversation around, they know what the problem is. They know what the vendors in the space are. You're one of 3 vendors they're evaluating. And now it's like, can you show me proof that you can actually deliver? That's where this becomes really powerful. Now, having said that, we've also seen, right, our clients who are B2B, who are large organizations or SME level, they've produced the case studies for that purpose, but they've also put them on their websites and put it into their email, marketing drip systems and whatnot, and that's actually been able to they've been able to attract prospective leads because of those stories, right? Because people see, here's a story about how you produce this outcome for this type of business. That's us. And then they naturally click through and want to read it. And that might not always get them to the sale straight away, but it brings them into the funnel, right?
I wonder if this would have been as effective 5 or 10 years ago as it is right now. Because now people want asynchronous. They want to go and do things on their own time. And so instead of me calling you right away, I might go on your website because, of course, I'm going to Google you. Mm-hmm. And whether somebody referred you or not, I'm either going to go to your LinkedIn or I'm going to Google you. And either way, if you plant those case studies and really step into their shoes where you're providing them this really high value, and here's the best use cases. And I think another part is also drawing the line of who you work with and why, and who you don't work with.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because if you have those 3 to 5 best use cases and somebody gets excited about that, then they're in the right spot. But if they're outside of that, there might be a good reason to have those on your website to detract them from trying to work with you because it's not in anyone's best interest.
100%. And so I'm, you're aware of this, but the audience might not be, but I'm in a research phase for my book. And how to leverage case studies for demand generation and sales and whatnot. And I've got an interview lined up with HubSpot. Thanks to you. Thanks for the introduction, Nick. So that's coming up. And one thing they asked me straight off the bat was, what data do you want us to pull for that interview, right? Because I basically said, look, I want this to be transparent. I want the audience and the readers to actually see how this works, right? And it's not just us here saying, yes, we love it and it works, but here are top organizations saying, here's the data to support it. And we've been doing this for the last 10 years, right? So right on. Like I completely agree with what you just said there. I had a thought about what you said, that you made a comment around, would this have worked better, 10 years ago? I feel right now, what I'm observing and what we're seeing in the market is we're shifting to a self-serve economy or a self-serve phase where buyers are researching. I mean, Google released that data almost 10 years ago anyway. So but the touch points have increased, right? When they released the data, they were saying it was 7 touch points before someone made a buying decision. Latest research says it's something like 21 touch points before they get there, just because there's so much data available and content out there. And so what we're seeing is, if you as an organization can provide self-serve experiences for research, right, specifically, that's much more, the conversions are higher on the back end. Because what's happening now is, I've had this experience where it used to be, if I wanted to learn about a product or service, the operator would say, hey, book a call with me, jump in for a demo, if it was a software or SaaS product, and I just resist that now. Like, for now, at this point in time, what I've said to a couple of software vendors is, can you just point me to a pre-recorded demo where I can go in on my own time? I don't need to tee up a meeting with you, and I don't want you to sell to me. I just want to have a look at the software. 30 minutes. That's all I need to see, and just walk me through it. And actually, it's going to work better for you too, because you're going to have people all over the world. You're not just people in the US right? And we're in different time zones. And for me, because I'm not going to jump on a call with you at 11 p.m. at night to look at your demo. Like for me, it's just give it to me, and then with that, give me some case studies, right, of businesses like mine, where they've used that software to actually produce results, right? So I'm actually sort of becoming the marketing advisors of some of these companies, and encouraging them to really take a look at that self-serve model when it comes to providing what prospective buyers want.
Well, I think that's a hard one because I agree, but I disagree at the same time with what you just said, because you don't ever want to get rid of a discovery meeting because that's where you learn. And I think to get rid of a discovery meeting, marketing needs to step it up to provide some level of guidance before, so that you lead to these case studies, so you can lead to this information. And I think asynchronous, like talking about you looking when you want, is even more important when you get multiple decision makers, because nothing derails a sales process more than telephone.
Yeah.
I go into a discovery call with you. We figure out the key points, and then we go to like move to the next step. And as you told your coworkers, it didn't translate exactly. And so now we're stuck because now there's misinformation and people aren't expecting the same things. And so now it's how can you make a decision when you're uncomfortable?
Just went through that experience, right? So I was helping a client to evaluate a vendor for some accounting software, and but it's not just accounting; it's accounting and CRM, and it's a whole bunch of things.
Mhm.
And I'm the project lead, so I'm actually looking at from a tech point of view. But what I needed on the call for the demo was the actual accountants, because they're going to use it in a specific way, right? They're looking for certain features and things as part of their workflow. So when I booked the demo, I hesitated to book the demo, but then I booked the demo, and then I said, this is only going to work. Literally, when we started the conversation, I said, can I bring in an accountant right now? Because I need them to actually tell us what's going to be useful for them, right? And that whole process could have been like, I'm with you, Nick. I'm not saying get rid of the discovery calls, because they're highly valuable and insightful. Just understand that prospective buyers also know discovery calls are sales calls, all right? And so whatever you can do to provide information up front, and also, by the time my sort of rationale is, by the time they get to the sales call, they already should have some inclination that they want to work with you,
No,
right? Like it shouldn't be.
I'm not
That's
saying like I disagree.
yeah,
I
yeah,
completely disagree. I'm just saying it should be thought of in the marketing. So my
yeah.
example is you walk into a retail store to buy a suit. If you don't normally buy suits, what are you going to do? You're going to talk to the best dressed friend that you have, or someone that's in your circle of trust, whether you go and jump on a Slack channel or LinkedIn or whatever. You're going to ask someone, you're going to get a referral. You're not It's very seldom that when something that's a little bit more personalized or complex, that you're just going to Google it. So then you go and show up to the store. Well, that first salesperson that greets you, unless you have a specific question and you know exactly what you want, you won't talk to them. But
That's right.
they've showed that they're open. Then you move in and you start doing your market research in store or on website. So you're looking around. If things make sense, you don't need to talk to a salesperson. You just buy. But if you have questions and you need clarity, you'll talk to a salesperson. And so this whole process of walking it through, so it makes it easy to buy, whether you want to call it, customer experience or buyer enablement, it's not there. And
Yeah.
so, everybody leads with sales first, which I'm okay with because it gives me a job. And I love sales because it allows me to build genuine relationships that go somewhere. Like I actually get to build win-win relationships, but I also see a huge opportunity for marketing to make it better for everyone by making that process seamless and smooth, because we know our customers better than anyone else. This is the questions they're asking. This is what's getting in the way, or these are the hurdles that should get in the way if they're not the right customer. So that if they're talking to me, I'm providing a prescription or I'm supporting them in the buying decisions. I'm not trying to go and I should never be my job to force them into it.
I love that you said that, because it's not about coercion. It's not about manipulation, these sort of things. It is actually providing enough information to help the buying decision, right? And sometimes you land at the place where you actually know this is not the right decision for you, right?
Mhm.
We're not the right vendor. Here's someone else we recommend, and that could be a partner or someone that's in your ecosystem that you would recommend, right? So I'm with you on that 100%.
And that hopefully happens before the sales call.
Yeah.
But you know what? Because there's nothing more uncomfortable for a salesperson too, to go, oh wow, like we had mixed expectations. They didn't match at the end. And so you got to now close the call peacefully and not save face, but it's just uncomfortable. But with all the access to technology and the simplicity of messaging and, social media and web design, I guess as a salesperson, I'm hoping that marketing will pick up the slack and be on less defensive so that they're taking on more of that sales enablement and guiding that journey. And I actually see sales being more the fulfillment and like emotional journey. But I could see something like case studies helping with that emotional journey because it takes out the guesswork. And then sales can come in later to support them on like fulfillment, actually getting your product or getting your service or getting the most of it. Like you were talking about with that one vendor you were talking about. I'd
Yeah.
rather see a salesperson invest in that, in customer success, than, ruthlessly try to sell and scorch the earth behind them.
I'm curious, because obviously you've been in this space much longer than I have. Like, what's your sense of the way sales is being approached, right? Like, are you saying that just through your statement? Are you saying, the majority of
Go
organizations
on, give me a little more information.
Yeah, right? No, well, for me, it's like I've had that experience, and I've shared that. I've had the experience where it's, let's just tell the prospect anything that they want to hear, and then let's move them to the investment. And I've had the opposite of the guidance experience, where it really is a collaborative sale, where it's well, what are your pain points, what are your goals and objectives, what's your time frame, what's your budget, all these questions come up, and it's a nice experience, right? And even when it's not a, hey, yes, I'm going to buy it from you today, I've come back to them 6 months later and said, now's the right time, let's go. And I think that's just a different approach.
So there's a few reasons for that, and I'm glad you bring this up because this is a good conversation to have. If you were starving and you had a family to support, would you do everything you could to be there for them?
100%.
That's the problem. Why would companies put people in that position? Like we talk about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If I'm worried about my family and putting food on their plate and a roof over their head, how am I supposed to do good work? Because that's me in survival mode, so I'm going to survive. That's why I don't believe in commission sales anymore. Commission sales also only pays me to sell you once. It pays for me to get that single transaction. It does not value any of the rest of the process. Because to me, the first sale is the cost of doing business. The second sale is when the real work happens and the best results come in, because not only now do they trust you and now they know you can deliver your promise. Because before, like even with a case study, if it's a wrong fit, there's a chance that you might not get what was promised to you. But that's what I would put it down to, is that we need the old school sellers, and the old school way needs to just rethink their strategy and be more respectful to people and customers and better leverage what's available to them than being oversold and undermarketed, really.
Yeah. Thank goodness there are people like you in the world, Nick.
I might piss a few people off with this one, but whatever. It is what it is.
That's all right. People need to hear it. They need to learn, and they need to book some training sessions with you, because we're talking mindset shift here, and a shift in approach. And I've been a door-to-door salesperson. I used to work for Moneris. You would know Moneris, being in Canada. So yeah, walk the streets every day, 40 shops or retail outlets, knocking on doors in the winter, minus 20 degrees and snowing. Walked into my suit, in my briefcase, and people threw me out. So people were like,
It's a hard job.
sales guy, get out. But what I learned through that experience was just what you say, when you actually don't come from that place. And I was desperate. I'm like, I need to pay my rent, right? Having said that, though, I didn't walk, I learned quickly to shift out of that energy and really focus on what does the buyer need, right? And there are just many times where I've walked in and said, okay, you've got a machine, we don't need to talk. But if you want to talk, if you don't like it and you're not happy about it, yes, we can have that conversation. And then, funny enough, we did use case studies in that process too, just not the way that we're talking about here online and all these sort of things. It was really, we had pamphlets, right, of stories of vendors that we'd worked with that were our clients, and so we would show them, here's a coffee shop or a cafe like yours that we've worked with, and this, they were able to save X amount of dollars just through our machines, and that was the collateral that I would walk in with, which was helpful in that process.
Interesting. So it's funny when we go and reflect back, like, actually, we did use that. I know in insurance we did all the time too, but they didn't have the storytelling that they do now.
No.
So they weren't sticky.
That's right.
And to kind of go back to your one point, I've never said this to anyone before, but I always find it interesting when somebody's being super pushy in sales. I always want to know, are they hungry or are they starving? Because there's the people that are hungry and they want power and they just want to have their name on the leaderboard. And there's the people that are starving and they're just doing it because they're trying to survive. And so it's usually what goes through my mind. And maybe it's just from training people over the years and seeing the mindset shift. And I feel bad because I see somebody that's trying to put themselves on a leaderboard by doing it wrong. And then I see the person that's struggling and I'm like, you look identical the way you're talking. There should be there's something wrong here. This shouldn't happen anymore. But I guess that's a good thing about, or the difference between all sorts of different sales training companies, right?
100%.
How are you working through things? Is it emotion? Is it logic? And I think that's another thing that comes back to case studies. Is it involves emotion. It's more than just black and white, and it's more than just numbers, because people they crave that feeling that, oh, cool. So you got a 270% increase on conversion. Okay.
So
how?
Yeah.
Come on. And I think that's where case studies really come in. And I think that's why a lot of the time too, I've stayed away from them, because they're fluffy. They're more advertisements or promos than they are informational. And maybe that's the biggest change that needs to happen, is more. And I apologize, like I haven't seen too many of yours as of yet, but from the way you talk, I imagine that's how yours are. Is they're more about that information exchange than they are, here's my numbers, guess and check.
Certainly it's the focus has been less on, like, data is useful and you should have data in your case studies, but we are talking to emotional beings, as you're succinctly stated here, Nick, and so what we do focus on is, in the storytelling, what's the impact beyond the metric, right? So it's good enough to, I'll give you a real example. We did a case study for an accounting firm so they do bookkeeping and more than that, but they're e-commerce bookkeeping firm, and they had a client who was already using they already had their own bookkeepers. I think they offshored to somewhere in India or outsourced to India, and when they came to my client, one challenge they had was, sure, the price was good and all these sort of things with the previous vendor, but the quality wasn't there, right? And what that ended up resulting in was a ton of rework, right? So what would happen is they would get their reporting and they would get their come tax time, and this is the nightmare for any business, is at tax time where you have to go back for the last 12 months worth of records to clean it up because your bookkeeper screwed up, right? Or they were putting the wrong values, right? Because you remember I struggle with remembering what transactions I did a month ago.
I've struggled with it. I did like the start of the week, and it's only a few days ago.
Yeah. And so, so as I was interviewing the client for this particular case study, I said to him, okay, so what was the before, what was the after? And he gave me some answers, and I thought, okay, these are good. This is what I expect to hear. And then I probed a bit further, and I said, well, what's the real impact, and why is this, important to you? And I said, tell me more about just your time investment, and what are you doing with the time, right? Because he said, what's happened now with this new vendor. I used to spend, a day, a month just to go through my books, and I don't want to go into zero. I don't want to deal. I'm not an accountant. I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. I need to be doing sales. That's where my energy needs to be, right? And client experience. And then he said, well, now, right, I'm spending more time. I literally, it used to take me, a day. It's taking me now 5 minutes to look at my accounts a month. Right. And he just lit up, and I said, okay, tell me, what are you doing the rest of the time? He said, well, look, my sales have doubled, right? Because I'm speaking to more prospects.
Stay focused.
Yeah, I'm doing that. And I said, okay, well, why is that important to you? He goes, well, now that I feel confident that the business is going to do well. Like it's before it was a struggle. It was not sleeping at night and these sort of things. And he talked a bit about his personal life, and his, he lives in Japan with his girlfriend and these sort of things, and we got a bit into that. And I said, well, that's what it is. Like, it's not just that, we saved you, the company saved you X number of hours. That's great, but what does that mean? What does that translate to in the real world, right?
Yeah, that pain and gain. That's a big gain from a little pain.
100%, right? And that's what resonates with people when they're reading the case study. And we've had feedback on that. They've gone, man, I feel that. I'm in that pain right now. I know what that's like. And that's a mark for us when we're doing these case studies, and when the people who are reading it can respond with that emotional connection, where they're like, yes, I can feel that, right? And I want that, the other side of the equation, when we come out of the pain, I want that, right?
You know what's frustrating?
What?
When they change sales, the way they get paid, they remove this part of the equation.
Interesting.
Because normally, like even with insurance, because it was all based, we got paid up front, but we were on the hook for 2 years. And if we lost business, we had to pay back our commission. But this was all part of what happened because we stayed, there was a relationship.
Yeah.
And so I've noticed with a lot of the businesses we've worked with, because they're only compensated on bringing someone in, what you just described is a sales process. It's the completion of a sales process. Because can you prove value? But now that everybody's getting paid differently, whose job would that be now? Would that be marketing? Would it be sales? Is it customer service? How do you track the ROI on it? And I think that's the biggest problem, because people are so, in B2B, everything needs to be tracked and has to have some type of metric.
Yeah.
That it shoots themselves in the foot, because instead of getting this great asset, they don't even touch it because they don't know how to track it. And I guess maybe that leads into two. Does the size of the case study change based on the size of the company, or is it the complexity of the product or service? What would be an average length of a case study, and what would be some of the things that you would look at? So say I threw 3 case studies in front of you. One was less than 3 pages, another was 10 pages, another was 50 pages. How would you go through to tell me if it was good or bad?
So what I'd be looking for is, I love the question, and I've been thinking about this since we had the last chat, and I've seen evidence of, I've seen examples of. So typically the ones that we produce, we're working with small business, so not necessarily the larger organizations, but we've had a SaaS company with 1,000 users, so we've had that too, and typically what they're not demanding, but they're requesting is 1,000 words, anything from 500 words to 1,000 words. So that's 1 or 2 pages, right? But I've seen larger organizations where so the SME level, where they're more detailed, and it has to be due to the complexity of whether it's the offering or the experience, right? So in the organization that they're dealing with, right? So the nice thing about case studies is to frame before you even enter the process of creating and crafting and interviewing and all these sort of things, you need to sit back and really work out what are the questions, what's the objective, what are the pain points we want to highlight, what's the story we want to tell, who's the best client to do that on, but also, what are the objections that are naturally going to come up through the sales process, right? And so my measure of success for a case study is does it adequately address the objections? Okay, so if you have 5 key objections, right, and I'm going through, and if you can do that in 3 pages, great, right? But if you need more detail to detail, like address each objection, and you might have 1 objection per page, and then now you're telling that story, then that's fine. Okay, at the end of the day, what we're looking for is what you've already highlighted is there enough on the rational side, right? Is there the data there to support and provide evidence that you can deliver? And on the other side, is there emotion there, right? If it's very dry and it's just numbers, right, and it's 20 pages long,
it's a white paper.
There's not too many white papers that I've read, in the last decade where I get excited about after I've read it.
I've only had 1 or 2, and the key ingredient that it blew me away that somebody could make something so dry, so interesting, was a good story.
There you go. Right. And we've actually done that too. So for that accounting firm, we actually did a research project. Took 3 months to do it. We interviewed 100 of their prospective or ideal client profile, and then we embedded within that case studies. So storytelling to match the numbers. So here's what the research says. Here's the numbers, and here are 3 stories that actually, so you get that quantitative and qualitative mix, which is nice, for a case study. So it's a bit of it's a contextual question, and that's the way the best way to answer that is to say, the larger the organization, and also how long is the buying process, and looping back to what you said earlier, is how many individuals within that organization need to see it, right? Because your case study also needs to answer the questions from each department or each individual involved in that buying process, okay? Because presenting a case study to a CEO is very different to presenting it to a CFO, right? Yeah. And again, different to the marketing head or sales, right? They're going to want different things from that case study.
Have you written or seen any of the larger how-to guides that they throw case studies in? And have you worked on any of those? I can send you a couple after this, but I've seen a few now from large companies, mainly like strategy and management consulting firms. Yeah, that they do like the how-to, but in like dispersed amongst the how-to is these stories, case studies.
Yeah, I've seen like EY, they do those from time to time. I've seen Salesforce, over SaaS platform, but they do those really well. And so it's because they've got so much data, right? Like these organizations, they're collecting all this data, and HubSpot as well. So they're able to then pull from that and combine it with these stories, and they're really great examples. And we can probably add some of those to your website and share them around, but they're really good.
I would love to go and see what HubSpot gives you. I would also think like Gong, Chili Piper, any of those companies where they're really pulling, and Gong's been doing really good case studies because they're literally listening to everything you say.
There's a benefit. That's it. Let's not get into that conversation. But the whole point of this is, the better picture you can paint for someone, the more context and the more data you can provide to support it. That's a better story, right? But don't lose the human element, and that's the key. I think that's the number one thing. If the human does not relate to it in any way, you're in trouble.
That makes sense. I'm gonna open up for Q&A. If anybody has questions, please throw them in the comments, and I will be happy to go and ask them. And if not, I'm going to keep chatting because I have some more questions. I'm trying to think of what the first one, but I think when it comes to case studies. I'm trying to think how to phrase it. Where do you think the biggest opportunity is right now? Is it large B2B? Is it more for marketing? Where do you think, if you had to say every single one of these companies should have a case study, who would you paint that picture? Just everyone, or?
Like I said, it's when we started, we focused on marketing. Right. I knew there was an advantage in sales because I'd seen it, and that's clear to me at the point of conversion when you're at that point where the buyer's making a decision, and you share a story of here's someone, 2 or 3 examples, or even just one is really compelling example that can really help take someone over the line. So that's a no-brainer for me, and I know you've sort of echoed that. When we started, we really focused on marketing, right? And so in the intro, you mentioned how we work with services companies, $1 million plus. Typically, they have courses, training, or programs that they're selling. So they've got the service, which is the core business, but then now what they're doing is they've sort of ventured into, let's kind of package up our IP and then be able to sell that as well, and help those who are maybe not at the right level to buy our full service, right? And so for them, they've used it as to really beef up their sales pages. So, for any program, they've got a landing page, here's all the benefits, et cetera, and what they've come to us for is they've said, look, we need to have some solid social proof on that page, because if someone's looking at the, they've got the whole marketing funnel and process, that they do, and they get the buyer to that page, and it's like, we want evidence that, or they want evidence that we can deliver this through this program, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then what happens is now they're using it as a lead gen asset. So they've actually put it out there through, so I've seen it done social media, YouTube, wherever it may be, the podcast, they've done the whole gambit. They've run Facebook ads to it. But they've also optimized the sales page for the buyer. And then they've incorporated into their drip sequence, even with a lead magnet up front, which is, about a specific topic. And within that, by the 3rd email, they've already sent 1 or 2 case studies. So when they get to the, whatever number email it is, where it's like, hey, would you like to buy this? It's already, the person is really pre-sold. And so that's worked really well. And then the interesting thing is, I've had a client that I worked with recently who is a psychologist here in Australia, and they are launching an app, which is actually to help parents become better parents with young children, right?
Good cause.
And one of then they hired me to write the landing page for the app. Okay, it was inevitable. Like when we started the process, and the first thing I said to my client was, I would like to get in front of 20 of your prospective users, whether they've been beta users who've already used the beta version of the tool, of the app, or they are just moms and pops who are and dads who having young kids, and they might want to be able to access a child psychologist at some point in time. And so they've become another form of case study, where it's actually a research activity, an exercise where I've actually put out a survey to these people, and these individuals, and we've been able to collect specific challenges they're facing, where they see the app fitting in as a possible solution, right? And these sort of things. They help me to write the landing page, but also now that we know this, guess what? Once the app launches, right, now we're going to come back to some of these users, because the tool will give us who their top users are, right? Because we can see that. So then now we can reach out to those people and say, hey, we would love to profile you as a user of this tool, and to share your story and how this has helped you and your kids, right? And so the nice thing about that cycle is, because we've already done the research up front, right, and we know what the pain points are, when we come back to doing the case studies, I know what questions to ask, because I already know, like, these are the angles, right? And these are the things that matter to them.
And now you're getting it in their own words, which
Yes.
I think is the biggest part, because it kind of goes back to my original thought of companies that would be this would be best suited for is ones that are hard to prove value and
Mhm.
long sales cycles, because
Yes.
it would substantially shorten the sales cycle. And if they got multiple buyers, even like it's even more beneficial. But now it's like, how do you prove value from a parent? Like
And do they want to talk
everybody's so
about it?
different, right? But now
Yeah.
if you use their own words and tell their story, that's going to resonate with someone, and hopefully not everyone, but the right power users that are going to get the most from it. And I think this can't be stressed enough. Too many people try to make everything work. You don't want to build something for everyone. If it doesn't have a bifurcating effect,
Yes.
that it goes and separates you, then you don't have a strong enough point. Coming into the end here, is there anything that you want people to know about case studies or content, or would you like to dive into your love of LinkedIn right now?
Oh, that's a whole another 30 minutes, man. So let's not go into the LinkedIn thing. Um, well, B2B, look, you got to be on LinkedIn. That's a no-brainer for me. I think, I've had the unfortunate experience of being removed from the platform, which I hope doesn't challenge my credibility. Basically, I'm challenging it, but I also understand it's a mammoth beast, and I'm not a $10 million organization that they're going to care about. Okay, what do I want people to know about case studies? I think there is a framework, there is a process that we go through. I've got a link that I've shared with Nick, where there's a link to our guide that takes you through the 6 steps of how to craft a compelling case study, and like just follow the guide. Like, to be honest, like that's really and I would recommend that you actually re-watch or re-listen to this particular interview and this episode, because there's a lot of insight into what needs to be incorporated within the case study. And don't ever lose the human element. Like, I think if you remove the emotion from the case study, you're doing yourself a disservice, and also your prospects and your audiences, because anyone can, and I see these SEO agencies that, like, you go to their websites and here's a screenshot of where the website was 12 months ago. Here's where it is now. The traffic's like gone, skyrocket, like this, whatever it looks like. But what they don't talk about in the case study is what's the impact on the business owner
I would
or the
always
marketing
love to know
person,
that.
right? Like, and is it that they were at risk of losing their job, right? Were they about to lose their primary client? Was it whatever it may be? Were they so stressed? Like, these things are happening, and we know they're happening, just people don't want to talk about them. But when you are the organization that talks about these things, guess what? You then become more personalized, and people want to work with other people, other humans, right?
I got a smile on my face because I saw somebody that gave me one of those snapshots, one for LinkedIn and one for their website.
Yeah.
They didn't know that I knew their boss, and their boss had just given them a marketing budget, and it was the first time they were allowed to go and invest in anything other than organic. And so they were boosting with their paid ads. They had but it was just kind of interesting. Like, yeah, it was purely organic. And I was like, it really wasn't. So going back to like asking the right questions, when you see those hockey sticks and you see that their messaging isn't perfect, that their process is choppy. I always wonder, when you have a product that if it's not great enough to sell itself, and your marketing isn't just unbelievable, how? Because to me, even at like the greatest salespeople I know, they're limited by the amount of time they can work. So if they don't have great marketing, or the product doesn't sell itself because it's so well made, how are you getting these hockey sticks? I don't know.
As you say, the proof is in the pudding, man. Like, show us the evidence, right? What's the process?
Well, I think that is a great place to end off, because we had some really great pieces in here. And thank you, everyone that's watching, and everybody that's watching the replay. I'm going to quickly go pull open the chat, because Anthony and his company was nice enough to go and give us a little perk from Simple Creative Marketing. So if you go to simplecreativemarketing.com/B2B Power Hour/ you will get a freebie. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's more fun when you go find out for yourself. But there might be AI, and there might be something about a case study. I don't know.
Really appreciate the time, Nick. We're going to have to do, there's more. We're going to delve into the whole case study thing. There's so much more, especially as I'm doing this research for the book as well. I'd love to bring some more stories for you. And I'd love to hear your own stories around just how you're using case studies as well.
Happy to go and share some, because I've been getting a few from tech companies lately. I want to hear what HubSpot has to say, if you're allowed to, and some of the other tech companies you're working with, and maybe we'll dive a little bit into your story and your tech life on another show.
Let's do it. All right. Thanks for the awesome conversation. And I have to pop off to another meeting, but thanks so much for listening, everyone, and hit subscribe.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Are you looking for a way to grow your B2B business or software company? Well, how about learning some of the best tips for content marketing, connecting with potential partners, and pitching your business? Well, if that's you and it sounds great, I invite you to join us on our upcoming B2B content marketing Q&A and speed dating podcast party. This is a live Zoom call for our community members and listeners to our podcast that can come along, and you'll get to interact, learn something new, and then also have a chance to get expert advice and make valuable connections. All right. The session will be recorded and published on our Authentic Influence podcast. All right. So register now and join us live on Zoom. The next event is coming up in a few weeks' time. Just head over to simplecreativemarketing.com/podcast party. That's simplecreativemarketing.com/podcast party to register. There's only 15 spots, so if you want to jump in, go ahead and do that today. Hope to see you there real soon. Now, just quickly, if you want to check out the show notes for this episode, just head over to simplecreativemarketing.com/podcast, and you can grab all the links and things and resources on there. And also, if you are a conscious entrepreneur, got a professional services business, working B2B, and you've got an interest in building influence and income through showing up, serving others, and being real, then I invite you to join my Authentic Influence Warriors Facebook group. If you want to do that, just head over to simplecreativemarketing.com/community. Okay, thanks for joining in, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Authentic Influence podcast at AuthenticInfluence.co.